Are we ready now? Your Honors, the prosecution is ready to reconvene, and I want to make a brief announcement. There is a change in the order in which we were going to presenting the sectors. We have a video conference set up for the evacuation planning and levies, and following that, we will be dealing with the issue of police brutality. So, at this point, Attorney King Downing is going to present. So, thank you for your indulgence.
May it please the court, good afternoon. My name is King Downing, and I will be speaking on the issue of the levies and preparedness or lack thereof. I would like to thank the judges, the victims who have and will be testifying, and also, if the court will indulge me, to also thank the audience and the organizers of this event. I would also like to thank my co-counsel, Lisa Crooms, for her work on this issue, and also a special thanks to Attorney Monique Harden for her last-minute assistance. My purpose here, as I said, is to bring out testimony in the area of the levies and the preparation leading up to Katrina. And I'll just make a brief argument in the beginning, and that is that what we're constantly hearing is that Katrina caused this damage, and Katrina caused this flooding, Katrina caused loss of life and great value and loss of property. But in reality, it was not the hurricane that destroyed New Orleans and the Gulf Coast. It was a whole host of players who did that, and it had nothing to do with an act of nature. It was the state and local governments who had a hand in this. It was the levees and their design. It was the Army Corps of Engineers. It was a whole host of individuals and organizations who had a duty to act that caused this. This was not a natural disaster. It was a foreseeable, containable, and controllable disaster. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the record. And the way I'm going to proceed with the court's indulgence is that I'm going to elicit some expert testimony who have looked into this issue, not only in terms of their own studies, but have also examined, and we will also examine, the government's own record. Probably unlike any other area which will be presented today, the acts and omissions that happened around the construction, design, and failure to create plans are the but-for cause for everything else that you will be taking testimony on today. And in my case, the presentation I will be making, we will be relying on the government's own admissions as to wrongdoing. And so I will submit that there are no questions of fact here and no questions of responsibility. That has been made clear by the government. Your charge, I submit, will be to find out whether these government admissions rise to the level of violations of international law, and it is my position that they do. And without any further ado, I would like to bring up my first witness. My first and only witness is Professor Robert B., who we will be speaking to by teleconference.
What is the last name, Counsel?
The last name is B, B-E-A.
Should we?
We have to move. Can't see.
Oh.
Here, let me turn this to
It didn't open up. How will I know he's here?
You were looking for a picture?
Yeah, it was here. Just click on that. There you go. Okay. All right. Just leave that up. And how will I know when he's here?
I'll have him address you. I'll have him say something.
Okay. Good afternoon, Dr. B.
Good afternoon. I think I can almost hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you quite well and see you clearly as well. For the record, good to meet you too, although I don't know if you can see me.
I can see you.
Good, good. Would you please, for the record, state your name?
My name is Robert B.
And where are you currently employed?
Employed as a professor of civil and environmental engineering, University of California at Berkeley.
And your title?
Is professor of civil and environmental engineering, co-director of the Center for Catastrophic Risk Management.
Your educational background, please.
My educational background consists of an Associate of Arts degree, a Bachelor of Civil Engineering degree, a Master of Engineering degree, and a Doctor of Philosophy. I'm a registered professional civil, structural, and geotechnical engineer in 8 states, including Louisiana.
Have you also had any personal experience with hurricanes in addition to your educational experience?
Oh, indeed. We'll call it both on a professional and a technical level. Our family used to live in New Orleans. We first came there as a young couple in 1960. I was employed at that time by Shell Oil Company. I had just left the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and we were living in New Orleans East at the time that Hurricane Betsy came ashore. That was September the 8th, 1965, a day I'll never forget. And the next day, when I was able to come from downtown New Orleans back out to New Orleans East, I had the distinct pleasure to wade and swim back into our home. For the next 2 years after we had lost the home because we couldn't keep up with the mortgage, we also lost all of our belongings, and including wedding photographs, no coverage, because there was no flood insurance, and of course the insurance companies, which you were flooded, tended to walk away from you. So for the next several years we lived in apartments, and the rest was history. At that same time, I was working for Shell to understand the characteristics of hurricanes, surge, winds, waves, currents, so that we could engineer and design the offshore facilities located just south of New Orleans. So I've got both a personal and a technical background in the primary natural thing that triggered the catastrophe of Katrina and as well Rita.
I'm going to ask the judges to accept as Exhibit 1 the photograph of the satellite that was displayed, the satellite photograph of Hurricane Katrina that was displayed at the beginning, and have that marked as Exhibit 1. That is a photograph taken by the National Weather Service. Dr. B, I don't think you're able to see me, but I'm going to describe a document that you have before you, and ask whether you recognize that document. The document is entitled Summary of Major Current Studies with Implications for Future Hurricane Flood Protection for the Greater New Orleans Area. Are you familiar with that document? And what is your connection to the creation of that document? What is your connection to the creation of that document?
No connection to the creation, but rather review.
And would you describe the contents of the document?
Describing hurricane and continuing to have difficulty getting the questions.
Oh.
Contains details and background on hurricane characteristics.
I'll repeat it again. The name of the document is Summary of Major Current Studies with Implications for Future Hurricane Flood Protection. Unfortunately, I can't hand it to you, but it's a grid. It's a grid in an Excel format.
Oh yes, that's the document that you sent me. I guess yesterday. We finally got it through.
No, it's actually a document that's on the University of California, Berkeley letterhead, and it has a list of studies and agencies and sources on there.
Yes, I do. I have that here in front of me.
Good, good. And could you tell me who the author of that document is?
I'm the author of that document.
And would you describe what's listed on the document?
A series of major current studies with implications for future hurricane flood protection for the greater New Orleans area. Those are the primary documents that I and my colleagues used as we conducted our investigation and drew conclusions from that investigation.
So in the course of your duties, did you have occasion to study all of the documents and reports that are listed on this document?
Yes, I have. That documentation consists of approximately 60,000 pages.
Then I would move to have the Summary of Major Current Studies with Implications for Future Hurricane Flood Protection entered into evidence, and then also to move to have Dr. B qualified as an expert witness. I'd like to turn. I would like this to be marked Exhibit 3. Dr. B, I'm holding up a report entitled Investigation of the Performance of the New Orleans Flood Protection Systems in Hurricane Katrina on August 29, 2005. Do you have that before you?
No, I do not. I have sections from that report here with me.
Are you familiar with that report?
Very.
In what way?
I was one of the co-authors and one of the co-leaders of the investigation.
Okay, I would like that to be entered into evidence, the report, and I would like to make reference to it from this point on, and I would like to refer you to section 15, chapter 15, looking at page 15-8. Do you have that before you?
No, I do not. I have chapter 12 and appendix F.
Well, I will describe that section to you. The chapter was entitled Looking Back, Organized for Failure. Could you describe what your point was in that part of the report?
This portion of the report is looking back at the organizational mechanics that ultimately we traced as a primary root cause to the breaches and the flooding that ensued during Hurricanes Katrina and Rita in and around the greater New Orleans area. I was the primary author of that section.
And would you describe for me the three main and most serious breaches that occurred very briefly?
Well, actually, there were more than 50 major breaches that infected the area. Those 50 breaches, I'll start down with the area adjacent to the Mississippi River Gulf outlet, known locally as the Mr. Go. Breaches in that levee and in the navigation structures located at bayous Bienvenue and Dupre. Those breaches were responsible for approximately 80% of the water that flooded into St. Bernard Parish. At the same time, it was overtopping in rainfall water that, of course, was being collected in what I'll call that portion of the greater New Orleans area bowls. The Dutch call these polders.
And as
The next one that gets influenced is the New Orleans East area. There we had breaches that were formed along the intercoastal waterway intersection with the Mr. Go, as well breaches where those two bodies of navigable water tie into the industrial canal. There were breaches along the east side of the industrial canal and overtopping at the lakefront, particularly behind the in the area of the lakefront airport. The next area that received primary water was from the main metropolitan bowl of New Orleans. You then extend all the way over to the lakefront, over to the industrial canal, and then essentially to the Metairie Bridge, which is a portion of high ground that helps partially the bowl from the main metropolitan area of New Orleans. That area received a large number of breaches that showed up in the drainage canals. Here's where there was no overtopping. The levees essentially gave way, and that's responsible for approximately 80% of the water that entered that portion of the system.
Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Okay. I would like
That went down, not up. Your controllers work in the opposite direction.
Can you? Oh, right. Here we go.
That's perfect.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I would like to turn to the failures that you listed in Chapter 15, and I would like to go through them one at a time. And I would like to start with the failure of foresight, and I would like you to be as specific as possible as to which agencies you feel met the requirements of that conclusion, and not limited to any one particular or to simply the scientific processes, but any others as well.
I'll do the best job I can. A way to express what is going to come forward here, we ultimately expressed as a technology delivery system. The technology delivery system consisted of three primary components. The first component was the public. The second component were governments that extended from Washington, D.C. To the local cities, parish level, and then there were industrial commercial elements involved as the third component. I'll do the job I can of tracing through the governmental component as painful because it involves the administrative, legislative, and judicial components of the federal government and those equivalent components within the state and parish parishes protection was not mobilized to effectively deal with those hazards. The failures of foresight were distributed throughout that governmental system. They included the federal elements as well as the state and local elements. The primary failure of foresight could be cited with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, of whom I am a former employee. As well, the local levee boards and the sewage and water boards became involved in these failures of foresight to see clearly what the future was trying to tell us. The second failure that we identified were failures of organization. The roots of the failure of the New Orleans flood defense system are firmly embedded in a flawed organizational institutional system, the thing that we called a technology delivery system. The organizational institutional systems lack centralized and focused responsibility and authority for providing adequate flood protection. Dramatic and pervasive failures in management existed, exemplified by ineffective and inefficient planning, organizing, leading, and controlling to achieve desirable quality and reliability in the New Orleans flood defense system. There were extensive, persistent failures to demonstrate initiative, imagination, leadership, cooperation, and management. These failures of organization pervaded the entire system, from everything we could trace from the federal government to the state government to the local agencies representing the people. The next failure that we identified were failures of funding. The failure of the New Orleans flood defense system resulted from inadequate provision of resources based primarily on recommendations provided by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, followed by the failure of the federal and state governments to fund badly needed improvements once these limitations were recognized. In several instances, state agencies pressured for lower cost solutions, not realizing that these solutions would result in lowering the quality and reliability of the flood defense system that we so vitally needed and depended on. Important deficiencies existed in the cost-benefit analyses that were used to justify the levels of protection and their continued improvement as knowledge and technology advanced. The primary source of these cost-benefit analyses were the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The next failure we identified were failures of diligence. 40 years after the devastating flooding caused by Hurricane Betsy, which I attested to personally, the flood protection system authorized in 1965 by Congress and founded on the standard Project Hurricane was not completed. The concept and application of the standard Project Hurricane was recognized to be seriously flawed, in fact, back in the 1960s. No adjustments were made to the system before Katrina struck. Early warning signs of deficiencies and flaws persisted throughout the development of different components that comprise the New Orleans flood defense systems. These systems and signs were not adequately evaluated nor acted upon. The next failure that we detected were failures of trade-offs. There was a history of flawed decisions and trade-offs that proved to be fatal to the ability of the system to perform adequately. Compromises in the ability of the system to perform adequately started with decisions regarding the fundamental design criteria for the development of the system. They were propagated through time as alternatives for the system were evaluated and engineered. Design, construction, operation, and maintenance of the system in a piecemeal fashion allowed the introduction of additional flaws and defects. Superiority and provisions of adequate New Orleans flood defense system was traded for mediocrity and getting along. The trade-offs were not okay. The next failure that was recognized were failures of management. Requirements imposed on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers by Congress, the White House, state and local agencies, and the general public have changed dramatically during the past 3 decades. Again, I can speak reasonably authoritatively to that since I worked for them back in the 1950s. My father continued his career until he retired into the 1970s. Defense, reconstruction, maintenance, waste disposal, recreation, emergency response, and ecological restoration has served to divert the attention from flood control to these other charges. Public and congressional pressure to reduce backlogs, in essence, of approved projects, to improve project and organizational efficiency through downsizing and outsourcing, to address environmental impacts and develop appropriations for other kinds of projects, has served to seriously divert attention and engineering quality as well. As expressed to me during one of my interviews with a 42-year veteran of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, then located in New Orleans as a part of Project Hope, he said, quote, "Bob, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers today is not like it was when you and your father were with us in the 1950s. We have taken engineering out of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers." The next failure that we identified were failures of synthesis. That's putting things together in the right places, in the right parts, in the right ways. While individual parts of a complex system can be adequate, when these parts are joined together to form an interactive, interdependent, and frequently adaptive system, unforeseen failure modes can be expected to develop. These unforeseen, but foreseeable in many cases, failure modes developed in the system during Katrina. It is evident that insufficient attention was given to the creation of an integrated system of components to provide an adequate flood protection system. Synthesis was subverted to decomposition. We broke things in pieces rather than looking at the entire system. It was a system in name only. As a result, many failures developed at the interfaces or joints inside the system. The last failure that we identified were failures in risk assessment and management. And I think I'm sad to report that even today this is happening. The risk, that is the likelihoods and consequences associated with hurricane surge and wave-induced flooding, were seriously underestimated. There was inadequate recognition of the primary contributors to the likelihoods and consequences of catastrophic flooding. Sufficient defensive measures to counteract and mitigate these uncertainties were not used. Safety factors used in the design of the primary elements in the system were insufficient. I would add parenthetically that they continue to be insufficient as demonstrated recently. Quality assurance and control measures invoked during the life of the system failed to disclose critical flaws in that system. Inappropriate use was made of existing technology available to design, construct, operate, and maintain a flood defense system that would have acceptable quality and reliability. Decisions used to allocate resources and to impel action to manage those risks properly. Risk management failed to employ continuing improvement, monitoring, assessment, and modification in the means and methods which were discovered to be ineffective. In conclusion, we lost our way. I can't hear you. No sound. Still no sound. Still no sound. The devils of technology. Well, he had a hand mic that was working, but it's turned off or turned it. Still can't hear you. Still no noise. No sound. We can hear the background of the audience, but can't hear you with the questions.
That would be collective work. I could name the question and you all can shout it out.
No?
There's no light or sound.
Nothing. Keep going. Nothing. King, can you hear me okay?
We hear you.
Well, I could hear you.
Yeah, see?
Check.
Still can't hear you, King.
Check. Yeah. Check.
Still nothing. Still can't hear you.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Well, that's good.
You can hear us back here?
Yes, I can hear you back there.
Hey, King, come back here and do this, because for some reason he can pick it up all the way here.
Hello?
I don't know why. There's something feeding it back up here so he can hear you, but he can't hear you down there. I can talk to him, he can hear me.
I can't read lips.
Check. There's a mic up here.
Right, you're feeding that. Maybe that's on the feedback.
No, I'm plugged in here. King, just tell King to come back here.
We want to hear you too. We can't hear him.
Still can't hear him.
Check.
We've already done
We
that.
tried that. We've tried everything down here, okay?
Yes. Yes.
We tried them all. All the way down. He went all the way down and tried them all. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, come on.
Yes, because they didn't, yeah, right. Have they fixed it now?
No,
How much more?
I just, what was that?
How much more?
I actually, if we, I don't have to ask him any more questions. I mean,
Thank you.
I didn't know if the judges had any questions.
We're about to cut the call. We gotta move on. That's basically it.
All right.
It's really, the call is causing the cross signals.
Okay.
So,
And that'll get the mic back up here?
that's right.
Okay, all right, that's good. So, sorry, sister.
One, two, three, four.
They're supposed to be.
One, two, okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move on, introduce the evidence. I don't think Dr. B can hear me, but at this point, I will conclude his testimony and thank him for participating, even though he may not be able to hear me. And if there's any additional information from him, we will add it into the record in some other way, including any questions that the judges may have in those areas. So I'll just quickly go through the other items I want to introduce into evidence. Exhibit 9 is the National Hurricane Center's, it's a list from their website of the advisories that went out, which provided more than sufficient notice, I will argue, to let all the parties know that Dr. B referred to, that a disaster was impending and that action should have been taken. That wasn't. Also, a report from the CRS for Congress that talks about New Orleans levees and flood walls and the hurricane damage protection. It also goes to foreseeability. I also have a House Select Bipartisan Committee report called A Failure of Initiative, where Congress admits on its own behalf and on behalf of state and local governments their failure to meet their responsibilities to prepare for hurricanes and also to have adequate plans to take care of those who were injured or harmed or otherwise left behind, and also including the appendix. A very important part of the appendix that I want to put into the record as well is that, here, take this one over there.
Are those all under Exhibit 9?
This, let's see, pick that one up.
9.
No, you got to add one to each of those. That's Exhibit 10. 9 was the National Weather Service. 10 was the CRS report. The numbers are off now. 10 was the CRS report. You want to hand that one back to me? This one? No, this one. 11 is the House report. I'm entering the appendix as a separate report because of the comments of Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, and so that becomes 12.
They also have a copy of this one already.
Okay. 13 is Hurricane Katrina, a nation still unprepared, a special report of the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs from 2006, in which the Senate makes many of the same admissions on its behalf, on behalf of the federal administration and state and local government. What number am I up to here? Okay, number 14 is Hurricane, oh, here, that's what, take this copy and let me have the other one, 14. Yeah. Uh, 15 is also a transcript of the testimony of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security, and the reason for that was to also have this tribunal take judicial notice of the testimony of another expert, Dr. Ivor Van Heerden, who also came to many of the same conclusions on the failures that the doctor spoke of.
That's number 14.
Yes. Number 15 is a report by the Multi-Hazard Mitigation Council, which did an independent study to assess the future savings from mitigation activities and basically concluded that had federal agencies and FEMA expended monies up front for levee construction, for evacuation planning, that the savings would have been 3-to-1 over the costs of the disaster itself. So anyone who wants to make a private side or economic argument that this was somehow less costly to fail to take the proper action, it was actually more costly in the long run. And this mitigation, Multi-Hazard Mitigation Council study indicates that. I'm sorry I'm losing track of the numbers because everything got moved around, so if you'll, okay. This one is 16, we're up to now. 16 is a Hurricane Katrina timeline, and there are also some other articles which support problems with the levee and failure to take evacuation responsibility. Number 18 is a report entitled, number 17 is a report entitled The Crimes of Hurricane Katrina and the Need for International Criminal Court Jurisdiction over the U.S. This is from the National Conference of Black Lawyers from August 29th to September 2nd, 2007. I mean, that's current right now. Number 18 is a U.S. Senate report. Oh no, this is the executive summary of the prior one. Number 17 is the study that was referred to by Dr. B, the New Orleans Hurricane Protection System, what went wrong and why, a report by the American Society of Civil Engineers. And I would just say briefly that it also supports the position that Dr. B has taken. Yes. Number 19, an area that Dr. B didn't get into specifically, this is from the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Government Reform. This is entitled The Decline of the National Disaster Medical System, an area that has probably, I think, is going to be covered elsewhere, but is also one that talks about the same failures, and this time the specific area of the inadequacy of medical preparation. I would also move that the judges also consider, under the principle of prior judicial activities, the information from the September 06 Bush Crimes Commission hearings that were held. There was a verdict that was rendered there. Page 29 also has findings with regard to the government, all levels of government's responses to the hurricane, including foreknowledge and the failure to launch rescue operations. This verdict was rendered by another group of judges in a hearing held in January of 05, and there are two parts to that. The first is the actual verdict, and the second is a videotape of those proceedings. Oh, those are good. I'll just conclude by saying, as I started out, that it's very clear that the hurricane did not cause these problems. These problems were caused by human beings who were parts of organizations who had extensive resources on their hands and had shown many times the ability to expend those resources in other areas, and as a result, not only left an entire coast of people not high and dry, but actually low and wet. And I'm urging that the judges here make a finding of not only violations of international law, but also even in the area of criminal negligence. Thank you. Just a second. No, I just need to bring my witnesses down here. Get some of this stuff out of the way. Okay, so you want to just announce just a minute?
We want to take a couple of minutes so that we can transition into police brutality. Mark King Downing will be the prosecutor for that sector also.
Just need to find my...
Judges can move back to their places now.
You need me to move anything out of your way?
No, I'm good.
There's a judge who wants to ask some question about the issue on the levies. What do you need? There's a judge from France who wants to ask about the levies issue.
Well, the only reason why is because we're only providing the judges at the table with microphones.
You can go to the microphone.
Yeah, we're already way behind. He has a whole nother category to present. So we unfortunately won't have time to take this question.
I tell him.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Did someone go to get your witness?
One is right here, and I don't see my other one.
No, we just need to know. One of us witness here needs to find the other.
The other one's right there. William's right there in the corner. Look at his laptop.
Oh, okay. Why don't you bring him around to
Which
this?
one, William?
Yeah, bring him around to this side. Let him just sit over here somewhere.
Not ready?
Yeah.
We're about ready to begin the police brutality sector.
Yeah, just have a seat. Just have a seat. I'll call you in a second. Okay. May it please the court, good afternoon, judges. My name is King Downey. I will be presenting on the issue of police brutality in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. I have some brief points, and then I will move into my direct presentation, which will consist of documentary evidence and also witnesses. I know that this has been designated as a people's court, and I would just ask the judges to cite as authority not only any international bodies or treaties that would authorize this, but also to even refer back to this country's Declaration of Independence, which says that if the government doesn't do what it's supposed to do, then the people can do what they need to do. I know I paraphrased it a little bit, but I was trying to find a copy of it so I could actually give you a quote. And so if I need to submit the Declaration of Independence into evidence here, I will if the judges make that request. My three brief points are that racial profiling and police brutality were serious problems in the area of Katrina long before the hurricane, and they continue to be problems during the hurricane and also in the time since. And also, my second point is that officers, superior officers, commanders, and elected officials are all liable where it can be shown that there is a pattern and practice of acts and omissions in support of racial profiling and police brutality, or where there's a failure to take action. And that's not only under international law and not only under the U.S. Constitution, the 4th, 6th, 14th, even the First Amendments, but also under domestic criminal law, which many times is not cited and which is overlooked for alternatives such as civilian review, when there is an adequate jury system which seems to be very effective at criminalizing those who do not wear badges. And so my presentation is going to be to introduce some documentary evidence, some of which is public, some of which are public documents and governmental documents, and others which are supplementary, which will be from NGOs and also some news articles also in support of my position. And then we will hear the testimony from two victims in what we're going to refer to as a day in the life of police activity during Katrina. My first offer into evidence, which will be marked Exhibit 1, is already been entered into evidence in the prior hearing, but I would like to also have it submitted here. This is the supplementary report to the findings of the Select Bipartisan Committee to investigate the preparation for and response to Hurricane Katrina. And this is presented by the Select Committee on behalf of Representative Cynthia McKinney. I will direct your attention to page 41 of the report, where she, on behalf of the committee, states that there were, in fact, numerous reports of